Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel, The Lazy Bookworm. I'm Rebecca. I hope everyone is doing well. This video I'm going to talk about my top 10 books of 2022. How is everyone doing? I don't know if you guys can tell, but I'm actually standing up. I usually am sitting when I do my videos, but I thought I'll just stand up, give my channel a bit of variety. And also, I noticed in the last couple of videos I did, I was wearing like red or reddish tops, and so this time I thought I'd wear nice canary yellow. Even though we are now solidly into 2023, I've been watching quite a few videos on YouTube looking back at, different booktubers' favourite books of 2022. So I thought, hey, why don't I do one of my own? I decided to choose 10 of my favourite books I read in 2022. Now this was a very hard choice, and especially the ones that were a bit further down, I could have replaced them with other books. Number 10 is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. This is about a man who is wrongfully convicted and is sent to prison on an island. Through different sort of machinations, he's able to escape, and he ends up in Paris, where he is now the Count of Monte Cristo. And once in Paris, he has one thing and one thing only on his mind, and that is revenge against the people that did him wrong and sent him to that hellish island prison. It is, I do warn you, it is a long book, it is a chunky book, but I really did enjoy it. It's a book that I would like to actually reread again this year. I don't know if I will, but I really actually would like to reread this year. Number 9 is Two on a Tower by Thomas Hardy. This was my first Thomas Hardy novel that I've ever read. I've wanted to read Thomas Hardy, but I knew if I was going to read Thomas Hardy that the first book had to be, let's just say, a lot less depressing than some of his famous ones like Tess of the D'Urbervilles or Jude. So I had to choose the first book wisely, and I chose this one. It is about this older woman who lives on the estate, and she becomes friends with and then eventually falls in love with this younger man. And the Two on a Tower refers to the tower that they both go up on, to the upper deck and observe the stars on. While it is in some parts quite melodramatic, and as I said, the ending is not one I hoped for the couple, it is definitely a lot less intense and depressing than some of Hardy's other novels. Number 8 is Passing by Nella Larsen. This is a book that was released in the first half of the 20th century. It is about the whole idea of passing. And passing is where black man or black woman in America, their skin was light enough that they were able to pass as white. And I didn't really know much about this whole sort of concept. Apparently it did happen. And this book is about two women that are able to sort of pass as white. And they were childhood friends, and they lost touch, and then they met up again, and the main character finds out that her childhood friend has, who can pass as white, has married this very racist white guy. As I said, it was a concept I didn't really know that much about, and so it was really interesting to read this book. Also, I will tell you there is a good adaptation of it on Netflix. Number 7 is Resurrection by Leo Tolstoy. I had read in 2021 a couple of Leo Tolstoy's short stories, but this was the first novel I read by him, and also coincidentally this was the last novel he actually wrote. And I really enjoyed it. It is about this aristocratic man who goes on jury service and finds to his horror that the person on trial is a former lover of his. And so then the novel chronicles his journey as he goes with her to Siberia and tries to sort of make amends and redeem himself. It's a little bit heavy on the Christianity, so I do warn you about that, and it can be a bit kind of moralizing, I guess, in parts, but I actually really liked it. Number 6 is another Russian classic, and that is Fathers and Sons by Ivan Turgenev. I really enjoyed this book because I feel it really captures well the whole generational divide or generational gap. And it is about this son who goes back to visit his father in the country with his friend. And soon it becomes clear that, you know, the son and his friend thinks that, you know, his father is conservative and old-fashioned, and the father, in particular the father's brother, the son's uncle, thinks that he is radical. This was a really good book, and it made me want to read more Turgenev. Number 5, I have to admit, I've somewhat cheated, because number 5 is a tie between The Midnight Library by Matt Haig and Mary Barson by Elizabeth Gaskell. Two very different books from two very different time periods. The Midnight Library is about this woman who dies, and she ends up in this humongous library with books that are about her life and different versions of her life. I really enjoyed it. It was really fun to read, but it also was it made me think about, you know, yeah, you sort of think, like, oh, if I did this, you know, my life would have turned out better. But Mary Barson is a coming-of-age story about Mary Barson, who is the daughter of a worker in Manchester, and who, in her sort of late teens, early 20s, has two suitors. One, a working class boy, and another, the son of the mill owner. And it all goes terribly pear-shaped when the son of the mill owner is murdered. I really enjoyed this book. It was the first Gaskell I read. Number 4, again, me cheating again. It's another tie between Beloved by Toni Morrison and The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. Beloved is a book that was published in the 1980s, so you could maybe consider a modern classic, and it is about this woman, Seth, who was a former slave and who is now free and lives in this sort of little house with her daughter. And everything would be okay except the house is haunted by what she believes is the spirit of her dead daughter, Beloved. Eventually, the haunting goes away, but then mysteriously a woman appears called Beloved, and that sets off a whole chain of events. I really like this book because it dealt a lot with slavery and the sort of African American experience, particularly during and after slavery, but also I felt dealt a lot with memory and trauma. The Hunchback of Notre Dame is, of course, a story we all know. It's about Quasimodo, and who rings the bells of the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, and the beautiful gypsy girl Esmeralda that he falls in love with, and also the head of the cathedral, Claude Frollo, who also is in love with Esmeralda. What I really liked about this book is I had seen a few adaptations of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, in particular the Disney one. Not gonna lie, watched the Disney one, it was cool. And so I thought I actually knew the story, but I thought it'd be cool to actually read the book. But actually the book is actually quite different. In many ways I think it's actually a bit darker than the movie adaptations, and while it does feature Quasimodo, in a lot of ways it's more about Claude Frollo and Esmeralda, but particularly Frollo, and sort of his mindset and his sort of just obsession with Esmeralda and how that just consumes him at the end. Number 3 is The Mill and the Floss by George Eliot. I was tossing up between putting the Mill on the Floss or Middlemarch. In many ways, I actually enjoyed Middlemarch more than the Mill on the Floss. But I put the Mill on the Floss on because it was an unexpected read for me, and I unexpectedly enjoyed it because I didn't expect to read it in 2022, and the little I heard about Mill on the Floss, it didn't seem promising to me. It's about these two siblings, Maggie and Tom Tulliver, and they live with their father and mother in a mill on the River Floss, hence the Mill on the Floss. And you know, it sort of just chronicles their childhood and that, but when they're sort of in their teens, things go wrong because their father loses a court case, which essentially just totally ruins the family, and then their father has a stroke, which compounds things even more. I actually enjoyed it. I particularly loved the character of Maggie. I didn't particularly like her brother Tom that much. Number 2 is a non-fiction book, and it is The Five by Haley Rubenhold. This is about the 5 canonical victims of Jack the Ripper. I say canonical because there has been debate on whether Jack the Ripper had other victims, but these are his confirmed victims. And before you think, Rebecca, the 5 victims of Jack the Ripper, no thank you, this is going to be horrible and gruesome. Don't worry, it is actually about their lives before they met the untimely end with Jack the Ripper. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I would recommend it to anyone. And number 1, drumroll, is Mr. Loverman by Bernardine Evaristo. This is an amazingly warm-hearted and funny novel about this man in his 60s, Barrington Walker, otherwise known as Barry, and his family, his wife Carmel, his 2 daughters, his wife's church ladies. It's also about his decades-long friendship with Morris. And in the end, it turns out that him and Morris are more than just friends. In fact, they have been lovers since they were teenagers. And of course, this was all hidden from his family and his friends. He was deeply in the closet. I really grew to love Barry by the end of it. But also, it was so funny. He is such a funny character. And also very relatable too. Like, I could imagine just being in London and seeing like a Barry Walker walking the streets, you know. This was just great. I really loved this book, and this has to be the best book I read in 2022. That was my top 10 books for 2022. I know I cheated because number 5 and number 4 were ties, but anyway, I hope you allow me that indulgence, and I will see you next video.